Hey everyone, Sully the Scourge here. Today I'm bringing you my Temptation Warlock build. Uh, you're gonna have to stick with me here. These are actually the feats I use, but I would actually recommend a little bit of a different setup depending on your item level. The build's actually really good for whether you're a high level Warlock or a war level Warlock. Temptation is something that got buffed in Mod 13, and you get basically all the powers that you need through feats alone in a lot of the stats. The only difference between an 11k Templock and a 17, 18k Templock like me is that I will deal more damage and I'll heal a bit more. But you'll buff and debuff exactly the same, and that's why you see so many people when they're forming a dungeon group looking for a Templock. It's a real easy way to get into harder content as a lower item level, because again, you're still going to heal for a good amount. Your damage might be lower at a lower item level, but you're going to buff and debuff just the same. So here's the Capstone feat, and it's a little bit confusing. A lot of people build wrong because of it, but basically, the percentage that you have to lifesteal is going to affect how much you heal all your allies. You're going to see this also now increases your lifesteal chance, and it has some special interactions with two powers, Vampiric Embrace and Warlock's Bargain. I run the same exact DPS feats. Again, I'm 17, almost 18k, so I build for damage, and I run about the same exact, not DPS feats, but DPS encounters and powers. The thing here is you get a 20% debuff when your Warlock's Curse is on an enemy. So if you run Curse Consume powers like I do, again, I use the Fey Touch and Hadar's Grasp uh, to constantly multi-proc that Fey Touch. You have to remember to put back on that curse, because when you're taking it off, you're taking away that 20% increased damage you're giving your allies. So you got to remember to put it back immediately. Let's my heroic feats over here, they're basically the same as my DPS setup. The one thing I do differently is I take 3 out of determined casting and just increase my lifesteal chance. Somebody on my DPS video mentioned that they thought my lifesteal was low, and I'll show you why lifesteal really doesn't matter that much on a warlock. Here's my lifesteal, 2,400, pretty low, 6% chance, but as you're gonna see here, from feats, boons, different things, I basically go up to 43% lifesteal chance, which is plenty. Again, most people go wrong. They start trying to raise darks on their character. They start trying to put lifesteal on their companion. I have 0 lifesteal. I'm all offensive on my companion. Uh, a lot of people go wrong because they read this and they think, man, I really need a high lifesteal. But what they don't realize is you should be building straight damage when you can, because dealing more damage will also increase the amount you heal. You're going to heal for a lower percentage than if you were to focus on dark enchantments and those sorts of things, but it's a lower percentage of a higher number, so you get the bonus damage on top of the higher healing anyways when you start focusing on building damage. So that's where a lot of people go wrong, I think, on the Templock. I suggest building it like a DPS still, as you saw, with a very low amount of lifesteal. I still got a 43% chance, which is plenty to. I heal about, I want to say, 500,000 a minute on a good dungeon when people aren't just sitting around. A hard dungeon where people are actually taking damage like Tong or Cradle. But I'm going to start going through the rest of these feats for you to speed this along here. Hope Stealer, this again is one of those increasing lifesteal chances and lifesteal severity for you. I've got both of these. These two, the problem that Templock has is when you can heal basically any amount of damage your allies take, but if they end up dying and getting one shot, you can't heal them up, obviously, because they're on the ground. So these two powers both help your allies have more survivability so that they don't get one shot. This one gives a temporary hit point shield. This one makes the actual enemies deal less damage. And so, depending on which one is better, I think Compound Soul is better for me because I tend to have more hit points than the squishy allies that I'm trying to protect. The squishy DPS or clerics. So in that case, this is better. If you're lower item level, this is better. I personally use both. Again, you can heal up any amount of damage your allies are going to take, but if they die, you just can't heal them. That's the main problem with the Warlock. Dark Revelry, this is one of our best buffs. When you lifesteal, again, at 43% lifesteal and multiple damage triggers going on all the time, you're granted Dark Revelry, increased run speed, 20% power increase for 5 seconds for all allies. Again, this is not like what the other classes are doing, the clerics and the paladins with power sharing, where they have to be a high item level, have to have a high personal power to give to allies. This basically looks at the allies' power and then just increases it. It's regardless of your own power number. And so that's why a low level Templock can still be very, very effective. We've got both of these. Aurora Despair. Enemies are going to take 5% increased damage. This is the main point. Again, it's going to help you survive a little bit, but the main part here is 5% increased damage that enemies take. And here again, this is another increase in lifesteal for both you and your teammates. This is the one most controversial feat, Aldrich Momentum, and it's because it grants combat advantage. If somebody in your team, if you find yourself running with a regular group of people and you find nobody's triggering combat advantage, you almost have to take Aldrich Momentum. You get rid of one of these other ones that kind of help your teammates survive a little bit. Combat advantage is super important because everyone's running Tigers, and being able to not only get the bonus damage from having combat advantage, but then turning on their Tiger's debuff is very, very important. So it could be up to a 30% debuff, if nobody else is granting combat advantage. If somebody in the team is already granting combat advantage, though, this feat's basically worthless. Usually I'm running with an HR or Great Weapon Fighter who's marking, something like that, so this doesn't really do much for me. But again, depending on the group you play with, this could be very important and a very good feat for you to have. So I want you to make note of that. I'll let you make your own personal decision on that. But I don't use it because most other people are running Tigers and most other people are already granting combat advantage. Darkness, again, not really good. This is more focuses on you and not the team. And then, of course, you've got to have this Capstone. This is what the Templock's all about. This is what gives you the healing. The last note I want to make is you always have 15 leftovers. Again, I put it bonus 5 down here. And then I go up into power 9 hells to make sure that pillar power, which is a 24 DPS increase, stays on my main DPS all the time. When they're leaving or when they're running around. This is more if your fight takes over a minute. If you're constantly running in only 17, 18k boss melting groups, the boss dies in 10, 15 seconds, there's no moving, no running around, you're going to get more out of going up here and going for Infernal Wrath, granting an extra 5% less damage resistance, because the fight's going to be over instantly. You're not going to have to worry about people living the Pillar of Power. If your boss fights are lasting over a minute, if, say, you're not even into Tong yet, you're looking to get into that harder content, I find that Power 9 Hells performs better. Again, it's making sure you got a 24% increase more often or this flat 5% increase. And then this is just damage. I hope that helps. A few other quick notes. I prefer the wheel. You can give your allies 30% damage. Or one ally, your main DPS. It's a huge boost their DPS, and most main DPS are running with a Soulsight Crystal anyway, so you can stack it up. And again, you can check out what I do for DPS encounters. The only thing different is I change one class power. I use Dark One's Blessing here, which gives me extra lifesteal. So I hope this helps. Thanks again for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments.